Hey, it's James from Marketing for Restaurants here, and welcome to episode 102 of Secret Sauce, the restaurant marketing podcast, Restaurant Trends for 2019.
Some restaurants are quiet, lose money, and the owner works 70 hours a week. Other restaurants are busy, profitable, and the owners work a few hours a day. What's the difference? They have a secret sauce. Join James from Marketing for Restaurants as he helps you come up with your recipe for restaurant success. Your secret sauce.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. I hope that you got something out of our last two-parter, which was talking about the big things that we've learned in the 100 episodes that we've had in producing the Secret Sauce podcast. Lots of information there, and partially we've learned a lot, partially things have changed a lot as well. And the interesting thing that I'm seeing is that in the restaurant industry, like a lot of other industries, the biggest change that we are seeing is that the rate of change that we are seeing is changing. It is definitely getting a lot faster. And that's why I think that this is going to be an important podcast as well. We're going to talk about the big trends for 2019 as we're seeing them. So to come up with this list, we've done a few interesting things. We've looked at some Google search analysis so that we can see some sort of trends that people are starting to look for. But it's also based on what it is that we're seeing with our customers. So we're lucky to have a team of people who are talking to restaurant owners in over 17 countries now about what it is that they're doing, what it is that they're trying to achieve. And we are starting to see a lot of innovation, a lot of really interesting things that are coming to market over the next 12 months as people start putting their plans together. And I think it's really important to try and share that, because if you are one of these people who are following the trends, and for me, the perfect example of that would be the people now who are opening burger bars in Melbourne. So Melbourne, our hometown, in the grips of a very, very, very fierce burger war. The number of burger restaurants that are out there has increased dramatically in Melbourne in probably the last 3 years now. And I see some people who are saying, wow, there's lots of burger bars out there. Obviously, people are buying lots of burgers. We should get into doing a burger bar. And I'm like, that's probably the worst idea that you could probably have. Think about it. You've got the early movers in the burger bar wars. They've been doing this for 3 years. So there's probably 3 years worth of menu innovation. There's definitely going to be 3 years worth of process innovation. If they've been around for 3 years, they're probably doing a pretty good job. So they've been refining their product, they've been refining their processes, they've been refining everything it is about their business, which means that for you to come in now, 3 months late, unless you've got an absolutely killer idea, a menu item, or a marketing strategy, it's going to be pretty tough to come up with any sort of advantage that is going to be able to win some burger customers over to you. And, I'm thinking about the established players, 8-Bit, they do a great burger. Obviously, Huxtaburger, the big daddy, I think, in the burger wars. There's a few other out there. I really like Easy's, and if you ever come to Melbourne, you got to try Easy's out. The thing that I think makes them different, and I'm always a little bit skeptical about fit out. I think that far too many people spend far too much money on fit out. These guys, I don't know what they spend on fit out, probably an absolute fortune. But the amazing thing about Easy's is they took a couple of train carriages, some old train carriages, and they've put them up like on top of a 4-story building. So as you're walking up to the place, you can see the train carriages up the top. So you get this amazing experience, right? Experience. Remember, we talk about that quite a bit. You've created an experience where people are, they're remembering what it was like to be on one of these train carriages. It creates that nostalgia. On top of that, they've got a pretty killer menu as well. So these are the people that you're up against when you open your burger bar, and I'm thinking, it's probably going to be pretty tough. So you want to be looking for the new trends so that you can be ahead of the curve. I was at the Restaurant Leaders Summit earlier this year, and I think it was Frank Kimura who was up on stage. If you don't know Frank, very successful restaurateur behind restaurants like Chin Chin, and he said that you can't be following the trends. You need to be dictating what those trends are going to be. And this is one of the things that I think is really interesting, is the fact that where do these trends come from? Well, there's actually someone who starts these trends. There's people who drive these trends, and they're the ones who are making all of the money because they're the ones who are investing it. They've got the first mover advantage. And I think that's why, really sort of divining into the trends is one thing. And we're going to sort of look at that as we go through our the trends that we think are going to be really big in 2018. Now, before we get into this, I just want to talk briefly about one of the tools that we've used in doing our research for what we think is going to be big. And I think that it's a tool that we've put a few restaurant owners onto. It's a tool that I think more restaurant owners should be thinking about using it, and that is Google Trends. So Google Trends basically allows you to access some pretty big data sets. And this is one of the things that I'm really interested in is how can a small business access big data? And this is the perfect example of that. So, if you look at your website, there's not going to be enough web queries that you get information on anyway to be able to really make any great deductions. Google Trends allows you to see what people in all sorts of places are searching for, and you get to see that trend over time, as the name suggests. So all you got to do is Google Trends, and it takes you to trends.google.com, and it asks you to put in a search term. So you can put in anything that you like. Now, one of the big things with this is I think it's important looking at the long-term trends. So I like to look at 5-year graphs of what people have been searching for. You can set the area for those search terms. Now, this is a really cool thing that you can do because unless, of course, you're planning the rollout of a national restaurant franchise, I hope you are, that'd be exciting. But if you're not, obviously it's not really that important if you're looking at searches across the entire United States when you're just in New York, because there could be significant trends between East and West Coast. There could be significant trends between the North and the South. You want to be on top of that. So it allows you to actually put the state in where you want to have a look at those search terms. Now, the other thing that's really amazing is that it allows you to compare search terms. So one of the big search terms that is trending at the moment is dessert places near me. So now this obviously says, a couple of really interesting things. One, you want to have dessert places near me somewhere on your website. You want to make sure that your Google Places is set up really, really tightly because Google wants to drive people into that very quickly. But there are 3 times as many people searching that in 2018 than there was in 2015. And so you would think that dessert places are probably one of those things that are an important opportunity. Like, all I'm saying is that it's an opportunity. There's more people looking for dessert places near me than they were 3 years ago. Now, interestingly enough, you can actually compare search terms as well. So I've put in dessert places near me and also burger restaurant. And the interesting thing is, so what it does is it gives you a numeric answer. So at some point there will have been the most searches ever for a search term. So the most searches ever for burger restaurant was around August in 2018. It's fallen off a little bit, probably because of winter in the United States as people sort of hunker down and they settle down for the holiday period. So it's decreased about a third since then. The interesting thing is, though, that there are nearly 4 times as many people looking for a burger restaurant than they are looking for dessert places near me. Now, you've got to play around with it. You've got to make sure that you get your search term right. You've got to make sure that you're putting in the search term that people are actually using for what it is that you're thinking about, because sometimes it can be a little bit counterintuitive. But this is a really powerful tool, particularly when you are either in the business planning stage of opening your restaurant, so hopefully that's about 6 to 12 months out of opening day, maybe even a little bit more. I say that hopefully, potentially it's not the case. Potentially you've gone and opened 6 months ago and now you're only discovering Google Trends. That's a little bit sad. That's a little bit messy. You want to be doing this before you're opening because that gives you a really good idea of the demographics. And now, having said that, so we've talked about there being a lot more people searching for burger restaurants. There's probably a lot more competition there. So just because not a lot of people are looking for dessert restaurants, I still think that when you look at niching down, there's a few problems with dessert restaurants. Obviously, these restaurants, I think, go well when you've got 10 other restaurants in a strip, so that people can say, you know what, this place has got a very generic dessert offering, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk 5 doors down and I'm going to have dessert there. That works really well. Couple of issues: really does rule out lunch, really does rule out breakfast, goes against one of the big trends that I think is something to think about, and that's healthy. So then you want to start thinking, well, what does a dessert lunch look like? What does a dessert breakfast look like? And of course, how do you make that healthier? So this is how you take that information and start melding it into hopefully a successful business plan. The other time that Google Trends really comes into its own is when you are looking for inspiration for your menu. Because of the fact that on your menu, on your specials board, you've really got the opportunity to sort of change it up and to sort of like be led by what it is that the customers are wanting. And it might be, the fact that the customers are going to come in for something that you put up there new, or it might be that they're curious. And I think the best example that I can think of is the Sony Walkman. People didn't really have a need to go walking and listening to music at the same time. It wasn't something that was in people's minds. This is the hardest part of innovation to do, to come up with a product that is so revolutionary that people don't even see that as being a problem. Henry Ford used to talk about it. If I asked people what they wanted before I built the automobile, they would have said they wanted faster horses. That was all their frame of reference was capable of providing them with. So from a marketing point of view, it can be a little bit tricky. Google Trends won't pick that up. Well, a lot of the time it won't pick it up, and this is where you have to sometimes take that bit of a leap of faith and come up with something that people aren't searching for. But, I always think it's interesting. If it is something that people are searching for, then you've got the opportunity to put that up on your website, to run a bit of a Facebook campaign, to drive people, hey, we've got this new hot item. If it isn't something that people are searching for, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be having a bit of a try with it. What you do is you put it up on the specials board, you run it in Facebook, and you see if they will come. Very easy to do, particularly from the specials menu. And we're seeing more and more people who are playing with that, and I think that that's exciting to see. So let's start having a look at the innovations that we want to start... the trends that we want to start talking about. So front and center, the big thing that a lot of people are talking about is costs. And this is going to impact people in a lot of ways. We've got increasing food costs, increasing leasing costs, property costs. Wage costs are a huge factor around the world. So in Australia, our home patch, there's been a lot of issues within the court system about people being paid cash rather than being paid properly, rather than being paid their proper hourly rate. And the thing that I find really amazing about this is that this has come from all of the restaurants that are out there. So Dinner by Heston has had complaints made against them recently. Now, I fully understand the fact that there's a lot of people who are prepared to work at Dinner by Heston because of the fact that they can work there for 2 years, and then, of course, they get to put that on their resume and they're going to be able to walk into an amazing job somewhere. But it creates an unfair advantage. It means that there are restaurants who are out there that are either doing a couple of things. One, they've got lower prices on the menu because of the fact that they're not paying properly, or they are pocketing more money. They've got a restaurant that may or may not be profitable that is now profitable, or they've got a restaurant that was profitable that is now really, really profitable. Either way, it's an unfair advantage. Either way, it's something that we shouldn't be taking unfair advantage of workers, I don't think. And also, we should be making sure that there's a level playing field. You want everyone to be doing the right thing. And that's from your local Indian restaurant, your local Chinese, your local Thai restaurant, all the way up to, the fine dining places that are completely epic. So how is this going to create trends in the restaurant industry? How is it going to impact restaurant owners? This drive for profitability, and either profitability because people want to make a bit more money than they have been, or, and I think that this is what we are really seeing now, is that there's going to be a drive for people who are running marginal businesses to actually make them profitable, because there's a hell of a lot more marginal businesses out there, businesses that are subsidized by family labor or owners who are working just ridiculously long hours and taking home very little to be able to do it. As the people try and turn this around, try and make it so that everyone's getting paid the right wages, including business owners. This is the thing that I'm really passionate about. You've got to be paying yourself a fair wage as well. What is this going to look like? Well, people are going to start to being a lot smarter about wage costs. So this manifests itself in a lot of ways. We are seeing people who are looking at the restaurant industry as an opportunity to come up with a product that's very easy to prepare, so that rather than having a fully trained chef, you can have someone who's, a 15-year-old with a very simplified process for preparing meals, so that you can still give your customers a great meal, gets to give them that great food experience, but be able to do it at a significantly lower cost. This is one of the ways that you're seeing it. People who are being smarter about their rostering costs. So looking at the roster, starting to roster in 15-minute increments because they can eke out that little bit of profitability out there. Food costs. Well, what are you paying food cost-wise? We're seeing a lot of people sort of sitting around the 30% mark as far as food costs go, but there are people who are really specialising in driving that down, whether they're getting the cheaper cut of meat, whether they're changing their recipes. Now, the food may not be as good, but what these people are doing is they're really focusing on what it is that they provide. If it's convenience, if it's quick, then the quality of the food doesn't need to be there. Now, I'm not advocating for that because I think it's a little bit sad that we see that sort of thing happening. But what I am saying is that we are seeing more and more of these people doing it. As the costs get higher and higher, they are by necessity looking at every part of the business where they can make savings. And if the food costs are there, then that is one of the things that they're actually going to try and make a little bit extra money on. Now, the next thing that we are seeing amongst our customers and within the industry in general is openings are going to be hot this year. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be opening restaurants this year. Now, I know what you're saying, oh my God, that's the last thing that we need. And I think, probably around the world, this is an endemic problem. There are just far too many restaurants out there chasing not enough consumer revenue to be able to sustain it. So why would people be doing restaurant openings? Well, it's the same old in that, the restaurant industry, it's one of those aspirational industries for so many outsiders. The people who are on the inside, they're a lot more hesitant to open a restaurant because they know the pain, the horror, and the commitment that it requires to open a restaurant. But there's a lot of outsiders out there who will say, I'm a great cook and I can cook a great steak, I should open a steak restaurant. And then, that's not enough to open a restaurant. Then they'll come into some sort of money, whether it's a redundancy package, whether they win Tats Lotto, something like that. There'll be something out there that they'll come into a little bit of money, they'll purchase a restaurant, and that's where the horror starts. I'm not really talking about these people. I'm talking about the professional restaurant operators. The people who've got the battle scars, the people who've got the knowledge, these people are really doubling down. Now, why are they moving into the industry now? Well, and I think it's because of the fact that the first trend that we were seeing was, a real massive focus on costs. Those cost issues, they're forcing people out of the industry. And that means that there is a lot of supply on the market for people who are either desperate to be able to get out of a lease. And I think, I'd defer to someone like a Robbie Doyle about this. Robbie, an expert in the restaurant industry, but I'm seeing a large number of people who are really desperate to try and sell their restaurant. We've got customers who are in that situation, super keen to try and move their restaurant on, thinking of ways that they can do it, hesitantly taking it to market and finding that the pricing just isn't there. You've got people who are tied into long-term lease contracts, which they are desperate to get out of, because if they don't, then they're going to be bankrupted. And then there's the restaurant that's closed. So, the restaurant owner has either done a runner or they've gone bankrupt. There's nothing left to give. It's all over for the restaurant, and the fit out may not have even been taken out. So you've got a landlord with a restaurant that has failed. They are not very keen on that situation. So they're very keen to do some deals. And this is one of the things that we've been seeing significant movement in the marketplace is people who are picking up restaurants with leases that are at amazing discounts. And I was talking to one customer recently. He's opening a new restaurant. His competitor is a few doors up from him. Now, the amazing thing is he knows what his competitor's paying lease-wise because that restaurant, the actual property, came up on the market 12 months ago and it was advertised with a $50,000 lease. Now, he's got a similar property and he's paying around $20,000 for that. That is a massive difference. That's $600 a week in difference between the two restaurants. Now, how is that going to play out? Is it going to be in the menu, a little bit sharper to attract the customers? Is it going to mean that he can take home a bit more money? Is it going to mean that he can plow a bit more money into the restaurant to build it up in things like marketing? You know what? He's a smart operator. I think it's going to be the first and the third one. The menu's going to be a little bit keener. He's going to spend a bit more on marketing so that he can create that big restaurant that is going to be able to really, and then, that's when his profitability is going to kick in. That's when he's going to start making his money. But we are seeing this starting to happen more. We're getting more inquiries from people who are just taking over a restaurant or about to take over one in 2 or 3 months' time. And I find that that's really interesting that people are picking up restaurants now when you consider that in Australia, we're coming into summer. That's the busy time. That's the time when people make their money. Traditionally, people sort of, 3 or 4 months ago, that's when the restaurants were changing hands. They'd made their money in the summer. They'd had that little bit of a kick. And then, of course, the winter was long. The winter was hard and they just ran out of cash. And that's when they close up. That's when the sale gets done. That's when the new owners take over. We're not seeing that now. We're seeing that actually coming forward. People who don't think that they can trade through the summer. That's a scary proposition. And, of course, as you see more of these restaurants close up, that's when the landlords really start to get concerned about what it is that's going to, who's going to take on that restaurant, particularly if the restaurant hasn't gotten rid of the fit out. That's a big problem for them. And that means that there's a big opportunity for a lot of people looking to pick up that restaurant. Now, of course, the next one that we're seeing is the food trends themselves. And I think that this is interesting, and I think it's a little bit concerning because this is one of the things that a lot of people are really interested in. There's a lot of restaurant owners who are saying, what's the next big thing in food? And I think that is really tough. If the next big thing in food is going to be Filipino food, now, I don't think it is going to be Filipino food. I wish it was because I think Filipino food is epic. I would lean towards a Filipino restaurant if I was doing a cuisine-driven restaurant. If I was doing an eclectic one, which would be my go-to type restaurant, I would have a lot of Filipino food in there because it's super yummy. But if Filipino food was to be the big thing, I don't cook Filipino food. I'd have to get a Filipino chef. Now, changing the menu, changing that big style, that is a lot of effort. It's perfect if you're listening to this and you're 12 months from opening a restaurant. Most of the people who are doing the planning, most of the people who are asking the question, they are 12 months on the other side of opening a restaurant. They've already opened it. And if the big trend is going to be Filipino food, you know what? Hey, it's pretty useless to you because you don't have the ability to authentically cook Filipino food. So, there's some interesting things out there. We've got, and I've had a bit of a look around. There's all sorts of really interesting things. There's people who are saying that, meat is going to be really big next year. There's also people who are going to say that vegetarian is going to be really big next year. If I was having a bet, I think that, I'd actually go in the middle. I think flexitarianism is the biggest thing. I was out for dinner on Thursday night and we ordered it wasn't a degustation thing, but it was 4 courses picked for us by the chef. And someone said, can I have the vegetarian option? Now, the interesting thing was, and someone said, oh, so you're vegetarian? I didn't know that. And she said, no, I just don't like eating a lot of meat and I would prefer a vegetarian option tonight. That's flexitarianism. And that is the kind of thing that I think is a really big sort of opportunity. Now, whether you go either way, I think that you need to have, or both, it's more about having a good, authentic story about that. So for the vegetarian food, you need to be thinking about, having something that is engaging and tasty. For the meat, where are you sourcing it from and how are you going to be cooking it? And I think meat's an interesting one because two people can get steaks from virtually the same time, and one can say that it's awful and the other person says that it's great. There's also an element of subjectivity in that as well. What I call medium rare, you might not call medium rare. That all makes it very interesting. But I think for the average restaurant, I think that the big thing to do is to, in your POS system, segment your meat and your vegetables and look at the trends over time. this is one of those things that too few restaurant owners do. They're not actually looking at the trends over time. They say, oh, it was interesting. I was talking to a restaurant owner probably about 8 weeks ago, and they said, oh, this is how much we actually do. And they gave me some numbers, and I said, oh, that's interesting. I'm surprised at that. When was the last time you checked? And he goes, oh, I don't know. It's been a while. They had a look at the POS information, and it was fundamentally different what had happened. Customers' tastes had been changing. Their customers' tastes had been changing, and that's really interesting. There's a lot of work to be done in the beverage space, and I think that this is an area that far too many restaurants are lacking in. They just don't understand beverages. They see it as something that you supply with the food, whereas there are other people who are realizing that you will get some customers who will come into you for the beverages and they will eat around the beverage menu. And also, if there's two restaurants with equal food and you've got the better beverages, then people are much more likely to come across. There's a whole range of things that you can do around experience design to create a hook to get the people in. Then, of course, turn them into a repeat customer as well. Lots of things that you can be thinking about. The perfect example of that is bulletproof coffee. Comes with its own sort of clarified butter. There's a lot of people who sort of swear by it. Makes you think clearer from a dieting point of view. There's just on the coffee front, you don't need to be going that far down the track. Do you have a proper barista? Do you make sure that they're properly trained? Is it reproducible? It's interesting. As a coffee drinker, I have multiple places where I buy my coffees from, depending on where I am. And you only have to get one bad coffee. And particularly if that's that first time, I know I would spend probably about $700 or $800 a year on coffee. So, and most of that is in one place. The first coffee I had at his place was really good. Most of them, I would say probably 90% of them, the same sort of taste all the time along. It's the same guy who does it. Baz, our local barista, epic guy. But are you trying to create that kind of experience for your customers to be able to retain them? Just in the work that he does, he's picked up, and I've probably been buying for him for probably, I would have thought, 3 years now. So we're probably getting up to $2,000 that I've spent in coffee there, which it's quite scary when you really think about it. But these are the opportunities that are out there around beverage. Tea is exactly the same thing. People think that tea is just tea. Do you want a cup of tea? Well, there's all sorts of different teas in there. There's herbal teas. There's, teas that you're going to drink for medicinal reasons. There's different flavors of your traditional teas. All sorts of teas in there that you can get that people aren't really focusing on. One of the things I find interesting about tea is, of course, the increase in tea Earl Grey that came about because of Star Trek. And I know today, but there are still people who will order the tea in that way because of the fact that, it sort of brings them back to a time when they were happy. What is the experience that you're providing for your customers? What is it that you're actually selling? Do you have tea Earl Grey in there? Now, obviously, people aren't going to come flocking because it was featured on a TV show from 20 years ago. But it's these little tiny things. What is the range that you've got there? Are your staff trained up in it? Are they capable of providing a good experience for everyone who comes in there looking for that? So we'll finish off there, and we'll come back in the next episode, and we'll continue with the big trends for 2019 as we see them. I think we've covered off on some really interesting things, costs and what you need to be doing to think about them. Openings, it's going to make it tough. The more restaurants that open, it's just going to make it tough for the existing restaurant owners out there, but I think it's going to be something that everyone needs to be thinking about. If your lease is coming up, maybe it's, now's the perfect time to be renegotiating or looking around for something a little bit new if you're looking for something, because you could be getting a place that is significantly cheaper rent-wise with an existing fit-out, with all of the kitchen in there already. You could be good to go and saving a lot of money. One of the things to think about. And then you've got the opportunity for the opening. With the opening, of course, you get that hit of the people who want to go and try the new place. And then we talked about the food trends. We've still got a little bit to talk about in that space, but we will come back and talk about that next week. Bye.
Want more customers for your restaurant, cafe or takeout? Every month, our marketing tools and information are used by thousands of restaurant owners just like you to help them find more customers and turn them into repeat customers. All of our tools and information is designed specifically for restaurant owners. We know you don't have a lot of time to spend marketing or learning complicated procedures, so our tools are quick and easy to use. If you're looking to increase your revenue and profits or want to work less hours, check out marketingforrestaurants.com.